Joining in on today's video, we're going to talk about how economic confusion works better than confidence. Now, this is something that I have really brought in with the credible threat theory, was the idea that if they can keep the narrative within the propagandized mainstream media, then people will not understand or know exactly what it is that the Federal Reserve is doing and how that impacts the economy, because people are looking at the mainstream media and believing these things that are being said. Like, just think about how much talk about the Federal Reserve lowering Fed funds rate and how that's going to impact the mortgage market. When you listen to some of the media, some of the mainstream media articles that are coming out, you are going to find that 4 weeks ago, it was pretty much locked in stone that if the Federal Reserve lowers rates, it's going to lower the mortgage rates. Everybody was convinced of this, but exactly the opposite happened. The Federal Reserve lowered the Fed funds rate and mortgage rates went up. Completely opposite of what it is that people were thinking was going to take place. And then on top of that, when you think about when the mortgage rates did come down, it was during a time in which the Federal Reserve was standing still. They didn't adjust interest rates. Like, the Federal Reserve hadn't lowered interest rates for the last year, but yet we saw mortgage rates go from 8% all the way down to 6%. But since the Fed has cut rates, the interest rates, the mortgage rates, have increased by almost a half a percentage point. Not quite, maybe a third of a percentage point. So we're finding that the actual impact to the economy is far different than what all the communication says out there. I mean, how many people are now saying that the Fed was too dovish, and that the jumbo rate cut has now sparked the idea of an inflationary scenario coming back to the economy? A lot of people are talking this way. But yet, if you truly understood the Fed funds rate and how they are operating, the Fed funds rate, even at the current location of right around that 5%, just under, that is still well above the neutral interest rate, which is a restrictive economy. They have not stimulated, like a lot of these economists are saying. They're in a stimulus program or stimulating monetary policy. That is not true. That is simply not true. They are in a restrictive policy well above the neutral interest rate. However, the people's perception in what it is that they are doing with their finances, with their investments, with their business, with their savings, that's all based on some other media narrative that doesn't really reflect the reality. See, when the Federal Reserve cuts the Fed funds rates, it takes 6 months to a year before that really impacts the economy. As people are saying, oh no, they made a mistake, they cut rates and look what happened to the jobs market. Those two don't correlate. Like, I mean, we can pretend that they do, but they don't correlate. Give it some months down the road, and then you can say, hey, this adjustment of interest rates at the Fed funds level is starting to impact the economy in a profound way. But what's occurring today has very little to do with the actual adjustments of the Fed funds rate and has everything to do with the people's perception. See, this is the one of the most obscure ways of looking at the economy, but this is the way that the Federal Reserve has conditioned it. See, there was a time in which they were wanting the markets, the people, the public, the administration, everybody, to pay attention to that adjustment of rates. They wouldn't communicate about it. Just one day you would wake up and boom, rates were adjusted, and everybody would start to incorporate this new monetary policy into their behavior. And it would have a profound impact on the economy. But since the days of quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4, and the failure of the monetary policy to stimulate the economy with the adjustment of interest rates, it doesn't work. It's obvious it doesn't work. If it worked, then we would have seen the mortgage rates coming down like everybody believes that it would have. I'm one of the few people out there who says it has less to do with that. That the actual adjustment of Fed funds rate has very little impact on the economy like the perception does. Now, granted, you're going to have impact on the economy from the adjustment of the Fed funds level, but what people are anticipating is not reflected in the reality. Right? I mean, just the idea that the Federal Reserve is in a stimulating easing monetary policy is inaccurate. They're far above that neutral interest rate, which means that they are still restrictive. They still have a restrictive monetary policy. They are not in a stimulating policy that would create the inflationary scenario that people are looking for or thinking that is occurring or that they're looking at. That's not the reality of it. Right? The reality of the situation is far different in the fact that the Federal Reserve has communicated out there in such a way that the people are incredibly confused. And that is the name of the game, confusion. Making sure that nobody understands exactly what's happening. If the Fed comes out with many different Fed officials saying different things about the economy, nobody's going to be able to understand what it is that the Fed is up to. When you have massive amounts of mainstream media articles with all these professional economists out there, and they're saying things like the Fed acted too dovish, too much of a jumbo rate cut, and that it's stimulating the economy and creating an inflationary scenario, that's delusional thinking. That's completely made up. It doesn't have anything to do with it. It does impact the people's perception, but the actual impact to the economy with the adjustment of rates will happen here in another 6 months. In fact, considering that it takes 6 months to a year to really impact the economy, we are still in the restrictive economy set at the height of the Fed funds rate. Right? Very different from anything else you're going to hear out there because everybody else is very confused. They're confused about what the Federal Reserve is attempting to do. They're confused about how monetary policy is operating. They're confused by putting all the expectation on the election, right? Never once ever taken into consideration that the monetary policy coming from the Federal Reserve has moved on to decades old. I mean, we're taken back into speeches that were given back in early 2002, knowing that the monetary policy adjustments of Fed funds rate was not going to be the effective tool going into the future. Ben Bernanke explained it quite clearly in Deflation and how to prevent it from ever occurring here, given late November of 2002. Go and look at the speech yourself. The entire thing was communicated in trying to explain how it is that the Federal Reserve and the adjustment of interest rates was broken. It doesn't work. And he said that's okay because they can use the credible threat, the idea of what it is that's planning on coming from the Federal Reserve. And that has so much more impact on the economy. But yet, if you don't know, if you're not aware of the credible threat theory, then you would be very confused on what it is that's happening out there within the economy. And since 99% of the people don't have any clue about the credible threat theory, they are really then set to their assumptions about what it is that they see out there. And you'll find it down in the comment section of this video. You're going to find where everybody is, or not everybody, but people are going to blame the Democrats. They're going to blame all kinds of stuff. They're going to be pointing the finger at all kinds of things, except for the reality of it, which is the Federal Reserve has convinced the people on what it is that is happening within the economy, but yet that has nothing to really do with anything. It's so, every article I read about this stuff, I left a few links down in the description. One of them was from a Yahoo article given 4 weeks ago as the Federal Reserve was about to cut rates. And they were pretty much, in this article, convinced that mortgage rates were going to come down and gave all the reasonings why it was going to happen. But yet it didn't occur that way. It went exactly the opposite. Now, the people who read that article and wrote that article and published that article are all scratching their heads going, so what do you think happened? Right? They don't understand that the Federal Reserve doesn't have control over the economy with that interest rate adjustment. They have it with the idea of the interest rate adjustment. And if they can keep the people convinced that it's because of that particular move, then they will be able to communicate out there to the public in a way that will then have that profound impact on the economy. If you were to understand that the interest rate adjustments no longer works, and that even if they were to bring it down, it would still be far above the neutral interest rate, which meant that it would still be in a restrictive economy, and you believe that, you would not find the situation that we are now in. It wouldn't work that way. But they come out with all this attention. Oh, look at this, watch these things, pay attention to this. And then meanwhile, in the background, they're going, man, I hope this really works. See, this is the problem that we are now facing within this economy, is that there's no real way of actually stimulating the economy anymore. However, if the people have this perception or a belief that it does, then they will conduct themselves in a way that will actually stimulate the economy. See, the Fed can't move interest rates far enough below the neutral rate to stimulate the economy. They just can't. The neutral interest rate is somewhere around 2.5%. And if the inflation expectation is remaining elevated, they might be able to get the neutral interest rate to rise. But people are now understanding that there's more of a disinflationary concern, especially when you look at like China and the ECB, that the idea of inflation is not as persistent as it once was. That neutral interest rate is probably not going to be rising much. And if that neutral interest rate doesn't rise significantly, they will not be able to drop the rates far enough below the neutral interest rate to stimulate the economy. It won't work. And now that's not communicated out there. That is the last thing that the Federal Reserve would want you to believe. They want you to believe that if they drop rates down, mortgage rates would come down. If you have the expectation that the Federal Reserve is going to be lowering rates into the future, it will have an impact on the economy as if those rate cuts had happened. And if you don't believe it, just look back from last year, the end of last year, when the dot plot came out with the 7 interest rate cut prediction coming to the economy, how that impacted the mortgage rates. It dropped them significantly. And that's the real monetary policy. I mean, I've gone over the speeches so many times, I don't want to keep bringing them up. You could just go back to just about every video I've done over the last few months and see me reading through these speeches, clarifying what it is that the Federal Reserve is really attempting to do. This is not something that is easily understood, and if you don't know the credible threat theory to begin with, the assumptions will run. People will run with assumptions on it. And this is what we're finding today. I mean, I think about like how it is that people are investing, people are postponing their purchases of buying a home because they feel that they are going to get better rates going into the future. People I know who are looking to sell homes thinking, hey, I'm going to have a better opportunity of moving this house at the price that I have it listed at, with the idea that the buyers are going to have a better purchasing capability with the lowering of interest rates that didn't occur. Like they're sitting there going, oh man, rates are going to come down. I think I could sell my house. And then they find that the rates didn't go down, they went up. And now it's more of a burden on the buyer to come and buy their house. What are they going to do? Lower the rate, lower the price in order to accommodate the rising mortgage rate? That's what they're going to have to do if they want it to sell. The buyer has a certain capability. They can only go so high. Their payments have, they peak out. For most people, I'm saying, there's a lot of people out there who could probably buy a house no matter what, but most people are suffering under the idea that they have a certain amount of income and they can make a certain payment. And if that interest rate goes up, all of a sudden they're gone. They're out the game. They're no longer a capable buyer. So when we see those rates go up like we have over the last few weeks, they're pulling more buyers out of the market. There's less of them. Okay? That isn't bringing a more abundant housing market. That's not bringing a more lively housing market. That is depressing the housing market. And again, that's so opposite of what everybody would have anticipated. You look at all these articles and they're saying, hey, they're stimulating the economy. They're not. That is not what's happening. It is not stimulating at all. It's very restrictive. And it's continuing to be restrictive. And as the deterioration of the economy continues and they are threatened or threatening, or the economy is threatening or threatened, however you want to look at it, with the idea that they are going to be forced to lower rates to deal with a slowing economy. But yet here you see the economy has retail expanding, has jobs numbers expanding, quite opposite of what it is that people would feel coming in a recessionary pressure type of economy. Everybody's confused, right? And if you weren't confused about it, if you were very confident in the way that the operation works, and that if the Federal Reserve was to lower rates, that it would impact the economy in a way that would stimulate and people would be able to go back to work and have these, all this other stuff, you would go with it, right? But the people are incredibly confused, and that is how the Fed wants it. They don't want you confident. They want you confident in the dollar enough, but they don't want you confident in their monetary policy. They have control over the narrative, so they put it out there like, hey, you can be confident with all this information that you're seeing out there. But yet when it comes, everybody's lost their mind. They're like, what happened? How come it didn't go the way we thought it was? And again, that's the confusion that they use to keep you in control, or keep in control of you, because confusion and fear is the easiest things to control. And if you are confused and scared, that is total control over you. If you were very confident, they wouldn't be able to adjust the monetary policy through the narrative propagandized mainstream media out there. They wouldn't be able to do it. But here they do. All right. Just wanted to share those articles with you too. Very true. A guy I know cleared trees off his land last year, but is waiting for rates to come down to build his house, from Canada. Right? I know a lot of people who postponed purchases of a house. Right? I know people who were saying, man, I'm waiting. I'm waiting for the price to come down. I'm waiting for the rates to come down. Right? So the rates came down some, but the prices went up. They said, no, I'm not buying in this market. Fed's going to be cutting rates. I'll buy after. The Fed cuts rates and the mortgage rates went up. Now what are you going to do? Your strategy isn't working. Right? This is the problem that most people end up facing, is that they assume what it is that has taken place within the Federal Reserve and their monetary policy. They're stuck in the old ways, the classical form of the Federal Reserve and how it is that they would conduct themselves. Because they're stuck in this classical form and haven't realized that there has been a major change to the way the Federal Reserve operates, everybody is now stuck at the words of coming from the Federal Reserve. Stuck at the idea of what it is that these other so-called economists believe that is going to be happening, and you read these articles and you internalize that and you say, hey, cool, when the rates come down, then I'll have my opportunity. The rates come down, you lost your opportunity. Now you're waiting again. What do I have to do? Do I have to wait for the economy to deteriorate even more in order to see the rates come down? Well, what if it doesn't, the rates continue to go up? I mean, it doesn't make sense, but yet that's what happened. Right? The Fed cut rates and the mortgage rates, Fed cut the Fed funds and the mortgage rates went up. So now people are going to sit around waiting. It was like, no, I need a better mortgage rate. We're going to wait till the Fed cuts. Is that going to work? That seems to be the strategy of a lot of people. Just look at the Yahoo Finance article I left down in the description. That's exactly what they were telling people 4 weeks ago. Now those people who were internalize that information thinking, yeah, okay, I'm going to wait for the mortgage rates to come down. Now they go and check it out and they can't get that. Mortgage rates have moved up. They lost opportunity. And all of this, again, is because people have not internalized the information for real. What they have done is they've taken false information. They've taken opinion and believe that it's true information. But the real information is what it is that the Federal Reserve is communicating to the other central bankers out there. I've taken upon myself to read every single Federal Reserve speech for years now. All of them. Some of them are really boring, don't really have anything to do with anything out there. And they have some impact. But when it comes to monetary policy, they keep that language very obscured. They keep it very confusing when you read through it. But if you understood and looked back for years and say, man, look at this. If you put these pieces together, going back to 20 years ago, even further back than that, you start putting these pieces together and you can see, man, there is a clear message being stated here that doesn't come right out in the forefront. It is hidden in the background, but it is there. It is very much there. Just the simple idea of flexible average inflation targeting, which is something that nobody, no article, not a single one. I can't find any article out there. Not from a mainstream media, not from an economist, not from a YouTuber, nothing. There's nobody out there talking about flexible average inflation targeting. FAIT, not fiat, not FIAT, FAIT, flexible average inflation targeting. Go and look it up. Find all the economists out there who are talking about flexible average inflation targeting. Crickets. Now, 2% target? Oh yeah, everybody's talking about that. But the Federal Reserve doesn't look at that. That's not what the Federal Reserve is doing. They don't have a 2% target in mind. They got 2% average inflation rate over time, looking at a 2% goal over the long run. But all the people out there, all the mainstream, 99% of them, right, are looking at it saying, no, there's a 2% target that they are trying to achieve, and once they get there, they have accomplished their goal. It's wrong. That is not right. And that's one of the reasons why most people are getting this wrong, why most people are missing out on their opportunities, why most people are sitting there standing, waiting, hoping, dreaming, believing, and it's all false. All right, moving on. So not here to clamp down on Brody, not here to clamp down on cap lock text. I won't read everything that's in caps. If you leave a comment that is completely capital letters then I won't read it. Brody is recovering from his wild night last night. Yeah, Benny, some of us have the good life, Other people, yeah, they don't get the wild life. Not like Brody gets to live. Simon, thoughts on silver at 33 seems ominous. Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm not going to get excited about silver until it gets to $50 an ounce. At $50 an ounce, I'll get excited about silver. Until then, I'm not that excited about silver. It's way undervalued. Like, compared to gold. They pull it out of the ground at a 10-to-1 ratio. Gold's at like $2,700 an ounce. Silver should be like $270. All right, $270 an ounce. It is so far undervalued at 33. 33 is still cheap. It's way cheap. All right. I mean, considering it's the most vital commodity known to man, that our whole life would cease to exist without silver. The idea that 50% of it goes to industrial use, which only leaves about half of the yearly production for investment purposes, doesn't leave a whole lot out there. Like, it's probably one of the most unloved, unappreciated, unnoticed commodities that is so vital to our existence, and how it is that it sits at $33 an ounce is beyond me. Now, I know how. It's because of the paper manipulation game. There's 150 ounces of paper silver for every ounce of physical out there. I know how it happens. But what gets me is that everybody else in the entire world doesn't see it. Like, you think about this, if at $33 an ounce, less than $100, right, for like even probably $80, you could go out and get 2 ounces of silver. This is the thing. If every single American went out and got just 2 ounces of silver, right, went out there and bought 2 recently issued American Silver Eagles, every single American goes out and does that, it would wipe out the entire world production. Just the United States. Like, you include Canada and Mexico, and you start throwing in China and India and Russia and all these other places out there who would be interested in having the idea of a physical commodity in their pocket. You start throwing all these people in there, there's no way that everybody in the world can even have 1 single ounce. That's how limited the supply of silver really is out there. Okay? It would wipe out the entire world production. Computers wouldn't be built. Cell phones wouldn't be built. Communications wouldn't happen. None of this stuff would take place if every single person went out there and attempted to grab just 1 ounce of silver. Right? $33 is so undervalued on silver. It is mind-blowing to believe that it's still there. In fact, you should take it as a gift. that is still under $50 an ounce and that you can still pick it up. Because there's going to come a day in which that the people are going to recognize what it is that is happening, and they are going to go out there and start participating in that market. And when it does, the sky is the limit on that stuff. You cannot exist without silver, and there's simply not that much out there. Right? So, yeah, 33, still way cheap to me. It's not that exciting yet. All right. It's 40 per eagle. That's what I was saying. You know, with $80, you could probably go and get 2 ounces. Charger Mopar, thank you so much. Trump appointed Pigeon Powell. Yeah, and see, now that's the thing. Like, this is another thing. This is how you know that the Federal Reserve is not political. Because here you have a president who appoints Powell. All right? Donald Trump appoints Powell, says, hey, man, I want you in charge of the Federal Reserve. Now, what is it to be in charge of the Federal Reserve? Does Powell make decisions? No. He makes a decision over his one vote. What his job is to communicate for the FOMC. So the Federal Open Market Committee, they're the ones who are in charge of monetary policy, not Powell. So when here you have a president going, I want to fire Powell. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's screwing it all up. Well, you got to replace the entire FOMC. You might change his vote, but then you got 11 other people who are voting. You think that's going to change just because you changed the person who's delivering the message? Yeah, let's shoot the messenger and expect that to change things. Is that really what people believe out there? Damn right it is. Because they don't know any other way. They don't even know what the you say FOMC to most people out there, they would have no clue of what the hell that is. They would not understand what that acronym means. They would have no clue that there's 12 voting members, that there's 5 alternates, 2 advisors that make up the probably one of the biggest policy decisions that impact the entire lives of everybody on the planet. The small group. Right? But yet, you know, hey, maybe if we change Powell around, that'll make a difference. Like, Powell doesn't have that much power. And then on top of that, here you got the same guy, Donald Trump, saying, hey, I appointed him. I want to fire him. I want to change the way things are done. He's doing it wrong, which won't do anything, right? Make zero difference with the FOMC. You know, change that one vote. Doesn't matter. You got 11 other people who are still voting. Right? And then on top of that, he says, I need more power. If I was president, I need more power over the Federal Reserve, which is basically admitting that the power doesn't exist within the administration. All these people are saying, no, the administration is responsible for the Federal Reserve and that the Federal Reserve is behaving in a way that is in accordance with the administration. That is simply not true. If it was, then Donald Trump wouldn't be asking for that power. He just simply admitted right there that the administration does not have the power over the Federal Reserve. And again, 99% of the people won't believe that. They will believe that the Federal Reserve is acting in accordance to promote a particular election outcome. I cannot find that communicated anywhere within the Federal Reserve. And I've told people, hey, show me the document. Show me where the Federal Reserve has stated that they want to make sure that this particular administration is elected. Show me. Now, I'm not saying that the individual members of the FOMC have their don't have a political view. Of course they do. We all have a political view. And they might behave in a way that then says, hey, I think this is what is appropriate for monetary policy in accordance to what my belief is politically. I'm not trying to argue that. What I am trying to argue is that I can't find that communicated anywhere within their statements. So even if it is, it's secret to them because I cannot find that communication. I look for it. Like, I want to find it so I can say, bam, there it is. I got it. Right? That would be a great video. I would love to share that information with you. I can't find it. It doesn't exist. Right? Out of all these documents that I've read. And yet people will still, dude, you're delusional. You have no clue about the Fed. And I'm like, well, okay. I mean, if you can't show me the document, if you can't show me the evidence of it, well, I'm sitting here pouring through speeches after speeches and, you know, all kinds of white papers and all kinds of studies and stuff like that. I can't find it. You know? All right. We've got the documents. I got the documents. Politics get me heated, most people. Yeah, and that's the thing, P. Nice. I have found that when I sit there and listen to people talk about politics, talk about how excited, they get real excited, get anger, get all kinds of stuff, and I listen to them, and I'm thinking, none of that shit you're talking about is going to come to fruition. You're all talking about stuff that, there's stuff that takes place that I think would be very impactful, especially when it comes to, things like the immigration and stuff like that. Right. And I do believe that that is very impactful. But what I find is that most people get so worked up over this stuff and then come to, at the end of the day, there was nothing that they could do about it. They spent time, effort, energy, belief, all that stuff that they were thinking about when it comes to politics that made no difference in their life, right? There was nothing that they could do to change it. So what I'm saying is like by taking on all this energy, effort, thought, and stuff like that, and it made no difference to you. Whether it didn't change the outcome was still here. So instead of saying, hey, I need to take this information so I can figure out what it is that I need to do so that I can best appropriately position myself on account of this information that I am reading, instead what they say is, oh man, this is going to destroy our lives. Well, guess what? If you are in fear, they're in control of you. And that's what I find coming from most people who are talking politics. It's coming from fear-based. They're going to destroy it. Oh, it's their fault. They shouldn't have done it that way. This is the reason why it is occurring. And all that stuff is low level vibration, fear, stress, anxiety, all that stuff. And meanwhile, they're going, man, that is good control. That is great control over the people. They keep you in that state of fear and nervousness and all that. That's the true control. If you were to sit there going, nah, that stuff doesn't make any difference to me. I'm going to still conduct myself regardless of how you think that things are going to go. That scares the hell out of them. Us being independent thinkers saying, nah, screw you guys. We're going to go off and start running our things our own way because you guys screwed it all up. They don't believe in this, right? You see that? That's the United States Constitution. I can't find a single political official out there who takes this into consideration. Right? They just don't. They're like, what is that? Oh, that old archaic document? Yeah, that doesn't mean anything to us anymore. It means something to me. It means a lot to me. And if they're not going to discuss it, if they're not going to talk about individual freedoms and rights in the confines of the Constitution that keeps them limited, then they're not acting in accordance to me. They're acting against me. The idea says, oh, you need to vote for the lesser of two evils, means you're voting for people who are going directly against this thing. Is that really what you're going to ask me to do? Is to take all my constitutional belief within this country that made this country great, and you want to say, hey, just toss that aside and just vote for the lesser of evil? No, thank you. I'm not into it. There we go. We're back. Tight lines. What if people work more to the point where they don't have time to think about being afraid? Then they can take their extra money and start a business, invest, or any number of different things to be better. Jack, that is a perfect comment. That is the perfect comment, right? You want to lower this. Hey, I would love to work 8 hours a day and call it quits and go and get drunk and smoke weed and watch TV and do whatever, like do all the fun stuff, right? Like I would love to do that after working 8 hours a day. That's not going to work. That's going to fail. In fact, I know it's going to fail because I did it, right? That's exactly how I was failing. People say, oh man, we got to do something about it, the inequality. What, we need to do something about the inequality, or you need to do something about your inequality? See, I've decided that, man, I cannot just focus in on my 8-hour-a-day job. I have to do so much more than that. I have to go out there and hustle and grind and figure it out to try and move into a position in which that I feel that I am achieving the things that I need for my family. Right? And now I can't do that with my 8-hour-a-day job. I could wish for it to happen. I could say, hey man, we need an administration that's going to make my 8-hour-a-day job be worthy. Right? Like, Is that going to happen? I mean, I can wish and hope and dream and pray that that's going to take place. It won't, right? The only thing that I can do is try and figure out what it is that I need to do with my time in order to benefit my future, my family, the things that I got going on. And part of that is doing a lot of work. Now, is it fun? Yeah, kind of is. I actually enjoy it. I enjoy coming out here and doing these videos. I enjoy going to work. I enjoy doing the research. I enjoy doing the side hustle. I enjoy all that stuff. And so by enjoying it, it doesn't feel like work. And that is how I have tried to position myself to lower the fact that I'm being separated from the rich, is to try and work harder to lower the inequality. Just in myself. I can't do anything about the other people's behavior. I cannot make the administration create an environment that says these 8-hour-a-day jobs is going to sustain your life with all the wonderful things that an American dream would have. Like there's people out there who believe that they can vote for somebody who's going to create that sort of environment. They are delusional. That is not the way it's going to go down. The only way it can happen is by you taking the initiative yourself to say, man, I need to do more. I need to work harder for less. Right? I'm not saying you do that for the country. You do it for you. Right? You do that for you. You do that because there is no way that you're going to be able to have your typical 8-hour-a-day job and then go and smoke weed and get drunk and watch football at the end of the day and believe that you're going to have a wonderful life off of that. And maybe some people might. I don't know. I mean, I couldn't. Not that nobody else I know can do it, right? So I'm not going to believe that it can happen. I'm going to believe that it's going to take incredible amount of work. And not only is it going to take a lot of work, I have to work harder than everybody else around me in order to be above them, right? It's like being in the camp when the bear rolls in, right? It's not a matter of being the fastest person. You just have to be faster than the slowest people. And since most people are not doing anything out there beyond bitching about the administration and working their 8-hour-a-day job, they're never going to be able to outrun that bear. And then they wonder why it is that they're getting eaten alive. It's like, it's pretty obvious to me. It was like, well, shit, man, maybe if you had side hustles and a second job and doing a day job and paying attention to what it is that you're doing and not chasing the pleasurable experiences, you wouldn't be eaten alive. You wouldn't be complaining. You wouldn't be accusing the administration of creating an environment that doesn't work for you. None of that stuff would exist in your world. You'd be looking at the things out there and saying, okay, I understand that there's some problems. I understand that this is pretty heavy, that that's a lot to take in, that it's a little too much. All right, now that I have absorbed this, what do I do about it? What is it that I do? I can't complain. I can't say I got to vote, right? I mean, okay, so my vote does barely anything. What is it that I need to do? That's the only question you should be asking. I got this information now. I need to position myself with it. What time is it? Gosh, guys, I already got to go. Man, I am just rambling these days on these videos. All right, yeah, I was talking about doing it for yourself. Then you don't have to worry about politics as much. That's right, Jake. And you can work on passion projects. Absolutely. Like, they want you to absorb the information in a way that keeps you in fear. That's why they constantly say, hey, they're going to do this. They're going to, they. Accuse them. Right? And you're like, oh, look what they're doing. Look what they're doing to us. Right? Meanwhile, people who are like, I'm going to go off and I'm going to make some money. I'm going to go off there and create businesses. I'm going to go out there and look for the opportunities. While everybody else is going, but the politics won't let you. Are you sure? I mean, you convince yourself of that, which then means that it's probably going to be the reality for you. But there's plenty of people out there who says, nah, that doesn't do it for me. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make my way anyway. And then they do. All right, acquire more skills, never stop learning. Absolutely. That is probably it. Just never stop learning. Never stop trying. Never stop, being in a position. Like, I can't say never stop being motivated, because people who think about it are not motivated, right? They want to be motivated. When you actually start doing something, that's when the motivation starts, right? You think about it, like, I have a fairly big yard. I don't like mowing the lawn. I don't like the idea of starting the mower and pushing that across the lawn. When it's all done, I am so happy. It was one of the funnest things that I've done. It was so much work. I'm sore, I'm tired, it's, everything. But the product looks great, right? Everything that I did looks wonderful. I feel tired and sore and wore out, and it feels good. Like, the idea of moving into it sucks. Doing it was awesome. Right? And that's where most people end up suffering, is that they want to do something, but they just think about it, which sucks. The moment that they start doing something, then they feel motivated, and it's awesome. Right? So people sit around stagnant and wonder why they're all pissed off and frustrated. I wonder, right? Okay, guys, I got to go. Thank you for hanging out. Uneducated Economist, you let me know.